Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. The show is called My Strategy. Well, I'm very happy to be here today and glad you could join us. Our episodes are live and on Saturdays at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. Today we're going to be talking about don't conform. It's better to embrace your uniqueness. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about the social influences of conformity. We're going to explore the need for everyone to feel special, how we can use our uniqueness to develop a competitive advantage in both our personal lives and also in business. And I'm going to give you some tips and tricks to help you find your uniqueness. We'd love to get your thoughts. Our studio number is 866-451-1451. That's 866-451-1451. You can send an email to talk@johnmhawkins.com. That's talk@johnmhawkins.com. If you send in an email, you'll be automatically entered to win our weekly giveaway. All right, well, we're talking today about embracing your uniqueness. And as I think about this topic for today, I start thinking about, what does it mean to be unique? What does it mean to conform? And as we reflect daily, and also specifically for me on Saturdays, it's really a good time to think about how these concepts work within our own strategy and how we can use them to our own advantages. So today we're going to be talking about conformity, peer pressure, real or imagined. There's 3 different types of conformity we're going to go through. I'm going to go through the pros of each one of those. We're then going to switch it a little bit and talk about conformity and the cons of conformity. While we're talking about how great it is to be unique, with conformity, it can actually hamper your personal growth. It can increase your chance for depression, and you can also lose your identity. So there's definitely some things to watch out for with regard to conformity. And as we go through the show, really what we want to figure out is how do we have a balance between conformity and uniqueness. I'm going to then talk about a document from Doc Dreyfus. He says we all need to feel special. We're going to talk a little bit about being special versus special treatment. Talk about most people are uncomfortable with the desire and a need to feel special. But you don't have to have that because all of us are unique in our own ways, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to then talk about developing your unique selling proposition. Now, I talk about personal development, but also business development. And when you're talking about your unique selling proposition, we want to find ways to, go and really have our own competitive advantage. Whether you're an individual or a business, it's a good idea to figure out what your unique selling proposition is. I guess the concept is that if you follow a crowd, you will go no further than the crowd. Also, strong products are differentiated from others. And I think in today's day and age, also, people are differentiated from others. Just look at many of the socialites and those on social media. They are their own brands, and their uniqueness is what has catapulted them, in many cases, to immense success. We're going to talk about, a little bit more about businesses and the challenge to remain relevant. And I think you're going to find that as we talk about conformity and also uniqueness, you're going to really want to, as I had stated before, figure out a way to balance the two. They're going to go into a way to identify our own uniqueness and develop those skills. So we're talking about conformity, the pros. Got an article here by Crystal Ayers, I guess it's pronounced Ayers. It's called The 15 Biggest Pros and Cons of Conformity in Society. She says here that conformity is a type of social influence which creates a change in behavior or beliefs in an individual so that they can fit in with a specific group. This change happens with a response to either real or imagined pressure and expectations that come from the group. It may involve the physical presence of other people, the pressure of social norms, or a general aspiration to achieve a specific level of success. What does this sound like? Well, it sounds like when you were growing up, peer pressure. Just because little Johnny's doing it doesn't mean you have to do it. But if little Johnny says you're not part of the group, if you don't do it, you have pressure to do it. It can get you in trouble, not only from a personal perspective, but also if you're trying to run a business or build any sort of brand. She goes on to say group pressure can take on many different forms. Teasing, criticism, bullying are all common methods used to generate conformity and society. I'd like to ponder that a little bit. If you think about it, with all the social media memes and beating up on various companies for their practices, for their beliefs, it sounds like they are trying to get them to conform using those sorts of tactics. It says some people make changes because of the pressure, because they want to make the change, but others feel like they must do it so that they are conforming. There's 3 different types of conformity. And this is all according to Crystal. She says there's compliance, internalization, and identification. And there can be either positive or negative influences depending on what the outcome of the group or the individual would be. So it's the 3 different types are compliance, internalization, and identification. So what are some of the pros of conformity in society and in business and in personal life? Well, conformity can help you abandon your bad habits. Peer groups can do an excellent job of helping you remove the bad habits from your life. Conformity helps you to reveal the unknown. There are many children who grew up under the watchful eye of their parents in shelter and in home life, and they were not exposed to the pros and cons of each decision that they would make. So it helps you reveal the unknown. Conformity can help you develop good habits. We all want good habits. It says here, people are observational, whether you're at work or at school or even a religious gathering. And I'm going to add in here any sort of event or venue. You're observing the positive traits in personalities that surround you. What you experience in the circumstances will motivate you to create either positive habits in your own daily routine that generate positive results. But if you see someone who walks their dog around the neighborhood every morning from exercise, that might inspire you to do so. And we talk about that a lot on the show with regard to modeling, having good peer influences, and really being able to find people that we want to emulate. Conformity aids in rule enforcement. It says every society has rules for people to follow a specific purpose. If we were to live somewhere where it allowed everyone to set their own expectations for what their life should be, then we would create a challenging place where it would be difficult for anyone to find success. So conformity aids in the rule enforcement. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to continue talking about this. You're listening to My Strategy. I am your host, John M. Hawkins, coming to you live on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. When we come back, we're going to continue the pros and also talk about cons of conformity. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back, everyone. I'm John M. Hawkins. You're listening to My Strategy. We're on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Very happy to have you with us here today, and I'm glad to be here as well. Right before the break, we were talking about conformity, and specifically the pros of conformity. In this segment, I want to talk a little bit more about the pros, but also talk about the cons of conformity. Right before the break, we were talking about conformity aids in rule enforcement and how it can help a society have individuals follow those specific laws. Another benefit is conformity offers protection against outside threats. When someone conforms to society, they receive protection from other outside threats to that society that could negatively impact their lives. We know for a fact that if there's strengths, that there are strengths in numbers. Our ancestors had to form societies to protect themselves against wild animals and other tribes. Conformity can also create a safety net. There will always be people who choose not to conform in society, but those that do choose to take this action help those who decide not to follow the rules because they continue to live within the realm of acceptability. Creates a safe space for us. Conformity makes the work easier for everyone. The goal of conforming to society is one that seeks eternal harmony. People who choose to take this path and want their society to continue to benefit others in positive ways. So those are some of the benefits and pros of conformity. But just like every coin has an opposite side, there is an opposite path. There's an opposite side to the conformity. So now we're going to talk a little bit about what are some of the cons of conformity. So as we've gone through the pros, you can think about if you're in your own personal life, in your business life, if you are a conformist or subscribe to those three different types of conformity, you can see how there are many benefits that could be that you could reap from doing that. Now there are some cons though. Conformity often hampers personal progress. The company that a person chooses to keep becomes a direct reflection of the success that they are able to achieve. If you surround yourself with positive influences, then your desire for conformity will create beneficial outcomes for you. But the opposite can occur as well if you are hanging out with negative peers. And some of these lessons are things we learned when we were teenagers, but they are still relevant to this day. They are relevant in business and in also personal. Conformity increases the chances of depression. The fear of social rejection is something that people will face at least once in their lives. It creates a feeling that compels you to blindly follow the people that you want to have like you. Most don't even give it a second thought. I'm getting this information from an article called 15 Pros and Cons of Conformity in Society. The author is Crystal Ayers. Number 3, conformity causes you to lose your identity. The actions that groups play, some individuals to make them conform, creates a dangerous issue because it forces a loss of the personal identity. Each person is uniquely different from each other. You might choose to go to a party or be the designated driver because you don't like alcohol. If your friend starts teasing you because you're not drinking that way, however, then you can be coaxed into doing something that you don't want to do. Think from a military perspective, the construct of socialization, where you turn in all of your street clothes, you turn in your glasses, you turn in everything you own, you shave your head, have a standard haircut. You are then issued the military grade replacements. That's a way to teach socialization and also help with conformity. But as you can imagine, that you do lose identity, your own identity. When it comes to fighting wars and protecting countries, you need to have that conformity, though. Conformity doesn't encourage change in the world. Though conformity in society encourages individuals to make changes that bring them closer to the majority, the reality of this process is that it doesn't impact mobile societies. We do not experience change as a group because there is a preference not to rock the boat. Conformity can create an unjust world. We want to think that all societies are based on the overall good that humanity can achieve. The reality of life is that things are very different. All one has to do is look at the impact of some of the dictators across the world. Many of the world wars were fought as a result of that as well. Conformity can lead to dependence. When people choose to conform to groups instead of turning their own course, they begin to give things over to society to which they belong. This process often occurs without the person even giving the element of their life a second thought. Conformity often leads to apathy. The desire for conformity on an individual level often creates a group apathy that becomes prevalent in society. The people who try to conform often feel like they can do the same things that the groups they observe are doing in the current moment. When they're able to achieve that success, they look to a higher power to handle whatever problems they feel are impacting their efforts. And finally, Crystal says conformity encourages a lack of social diversity. The action of conformity in society will always reduce diversity. People will be getting filtered towards groups that make them feel more comfortable. Groups will then combine with others to create communities that share like-minded approaches. Communities get together into parties that share similar platforms that seek out specific definitions of success. So as you can see, there are many pros and cons to conformity. And I think that from my perspective, as we think about our personal development, our business life, whatever we're working on, an organization we're trying to build, it's really important to understand how conformity and uniqueness work together. I don't think it's good to have 100% conformity, but it's not good to have 100% uniqueness either. And the struggle, the challenge is to find a way to balance the two of them. The way we balance them is we need to be aware of the implications, the impacts of how these two very different constructs affect us. They affect, the way we think, our habits, our good habits, our bad habits, peer pressure, depression. There's a lot of things that are impacted as a result of whether you conform or not. And I think, really the trick is to figure out how do you maintain your uniqueness? How do you think and focus on you as a unique person without having to be treated differently? And we're going to cover some of that in our next segment. You're listening to My Strategy. I am your host, John M. Hawkins. We're coming to you live on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Well, when we come back, we're going to talk about the need to feel special, being special versus special treatment. You're not going to want to miss this. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back, everyone. You're listening to My Strategy. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Well, if you're just joining us, we're talking today about don't conform. It's better to embrace your uniqueness. We're talking about the social influence of conformity and also exploring the need to feel special, using uniqueness to develop a competitive advantage in personal and business life. And we're giving you tips and tricks to help you find your uniqueness. I want to remind you that we are taking phone calls later in the show. The studio number is 866-451-1451. That's 866-451-1451. And if you send an email to talk@johnmhawkins.com, that's talk@johnmhawkins.com, you'll be automatically entered into our weekly giveaway. Giveaway includes a copy of my latest book, Coach to Greatness, and also a $25 Visa gift card. We're talking in this segment about the need to feel special. I mean, who doesn't want to feel special? We're going to talk about being special versus special treatment. People are uncomfortable with the desire to want to be treated special. And we want special treatment in certain situations. I'll go into that in a little more detail. I've got an article here that I am leaning on from Doc Dreyfus. The article's titled, "The Need to Feel Special." He says the need to feel special is common to human beings. We want to know that we matter to others. We want to be seen. We strive for achievement, some special status in the eyes of others. How we are viewed by other peoples matters to us. One way of knowing that we are special is when people treat us differently than they treat others. When we are singled out for special treatment, given special messages, receive special favors, we feel special. Now, we're not just talking about the need to feel special amongst people, because when I think about an entity, any entity could have the similar need to feel special. If you're in a band, if you have your own business, if you have an organization, that organization wants to have this same feeling of being special. Dr. Dreyfus does say that a problem can arise, she says. However, when we feel uncomfortable acknowledging our desire to be special, many people not only feel uncomfortable with the desire, but they will go to great lengths to deny their desire for specialness, as if it were a sign of weakness or other flaw in their personality. He then says, these people often tend to act out their desire to be special rather than acknowledge it. And they often act out in ways that adversely affect relationships. They are those folks that are always altering the menus when ordering at a restaurant, requesting special treatment in the form of dietary requirements. They will often request that you modify plans to suit them or adjust schedules to accommodate their special needs. I don't know, this is interesting to me. I did go through a phase when I went to the restaurants that I would ask for whatever menu item was out there. I would ask that they change something on it. And I didn't realize I was doing this, but maybe it was my need to feel special, and at the time I had not. I have since not made as many changes to my orders because I've thought, somebody has to go through and prepare this meal. And if I go through and make a bunch of changes and demands, it is just going to make their job even harder. But it's interesting now to see that there might be a reason behind why I had done that all those years ago. He says here that we have all been in a position of hoping for special treatment when we violate rules. Now, this is very interesting to me because I think we all want to feel special in these circumstances. He says, what if you are pulled over by a police officer? Don't we all want special treatment? Don't we all want to be given a warning because our circumstances are so special? We are different, and as a result of that, we should be treated differently. Another exception he talks about is when the airline want us to make an exception for when we are late for our plane or when our luggage is a bit too large for a carry-on. Don't you want special treatment? Isn't that a special treatment? Why would you deserve that special treatment? and not somebody else. He says that extra bit of attention to let us know that we matter is in a very impersonal world. We want to be seen as a person and validated as unique. This issue isn't whether you're good or bad, or you just want to be treated specially. It is how we deal with the reality of when we are not, and whether we can distinguish between being special and being treated specially. So that's really what he wants us to focus on, and I want us to focus on this too. There's a difference between being special and being treated specially. And if you know your core competencies, your benefits, what you're good at, that you are special, you've got the self-esteem, you don't always need to be treated specially. But if you are not acknowledging that you're special and you are putting that aside, then it can cause you to act out in different ways and look for special treatment. And I think, not only does this impact us from a personal development perspective, but it also impacts the entities that we run and create. A CEO who has policies in place that demand special treatment for their organization could have negative impacts. If you are in a band and you need to have only green M&Ms in the dressing room and a Razor scooter and some certain type of drink, that is the need for being treated specially. And it's not always required, but we just want to be aware of that requirement. He goes into a couple of different examples of how he says that he has a policy that if people cancel if they cancel their appointment with less than 48 hours advance notice, there will be no charge. So he says that he has this policy enforced. It's in an oral contract the first session. He has patients sign something. But he says, inevitably, there's always one patient who cancels with less than 48-hour notice, and they come in and they do not think that they need to be charged. He says they often feel wounded, hurt, not to mention disappointed and angry. They claim calls or alternative appointments, and because they did not remember, they think he should make an exception for them. They believe that he should pay for their errors and their memory. And when he doesn't accommodate them, they act out like a hurt child, and they may cancel their future appointment. You're listening to My Strategy. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. When we come back, we're going to talk about ways you can develop your USP. That is your unique selling proposition. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins. You're listening to My Strategy. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Well, if you're just joining us, welcome. I'm very happy to be here and glad you could join us as well. Today we're talking about don't conform. It is better to embrace your uniqueness. Talking about the social influence of conformity, but also exploring the need to feel special, using uniqueness to develop a competitive advantage. And we're giving you tips and tricks to finding your uniqueness. We'd love to get your thoughts. You can give us a call on the studio lines, taking those calls a little later in the show at 866-451-1451. It's 866-451-1451. And if you drop us an email to talk@johnmhawkins.com, that's talk@johnmhawkins.com, you'll be entered into our weekly giveaway. All right. So right before the break, we were talking about the need to feel special. Went through an article by Doc Dreyfus where we learned about special treatment versus being special. I want to pivot a little bit and talk about developing your unique selling proposition. Follow a crowd and go no further than the crowd. Strong products are differentiated from others, and so are strong people, by the way. As a business, the challenge is to remain relevant, valuable to your audience, and create an advantage. If I replaced business with person, entity, that would apply as well. We're all seeking to remain relevant, valuable, and somehow create some sort of an advantage, I think, no matter who we are. So I've got this article here by Trenton Greener. It's called The Importance of Being Different, Creating a Competitive Advantage with Your USP. And again, USP is your unique selling proposition. And I did not know what USP was at first. I had to look it up. Starts off with, the one who follows the crowd will usually go no further than the crowd. Those who walk alone are less likely to find themselves in places no one has ever been before. Those who walk alone are likely to find themselves in places where no one has been before. That talks to conformity, also uniqueness. Those who go with the crowd, those who conform, go as far as the crowd, or maybe not as far. And those who walk alone to find themselves in places where no one has been before. That is your uniqueness. He says, while this quote has been credited to everyone from Francis Philip Werning under the pseudonym Alan Ashley-Pitt to Einstein himself, the powerful message does not lose its substance no matter whom you credit. There's a very important yet often overlooked effect of not heeding this warning, one which can be applied to all aspects of life, from love to happiness to business to marketing. And copying what your competitors are doing and failing to forge your own path can be a detrimental mistake. He says, while marketers, and he is a marketer, we are all acutely aware of the importance of differentiation. We've been trained for the majority of our lives to seek out the norm. He says we spend the majority of our adolescent lives trying desperately not to be different, right? We want to conform. He says no one has ever been picked on for being too normal or not being different enough. We would beg our parents to buy us the same clothes that little Jimmy or Janie wore. We'd want the same backpack and the same bike that everyone else had. With the rise of the cell phone and later smartphones, on hands and knees, children would beg their parents to buy them that brand, that specific brand. And later it became the iPhone. Did people truly need these things? Yes, they needed them for communications, but also they wanted them so that they felt like they fit in. They did not want to be different. And I think that's what we're talking about here with respect to, building your own competitive advantage. You need to, at some point, conform, but also figure out how you can differentiate. He said, thankfully, as we mature, we begin to realize the fallacy that is trying to be normal. We start to become individuals and learn to appreciate that being different is seen as beautiful. It says we unconsciously and naturally seek out the norm, and we want to be different. truly different in a way that creates an advantage that we have to work for. He says the truth of the matter is anyone can be different. In fact, we are all very different. Even identical twins with the same DNA will often have starkly different personalities. So as a business, the real challenge lies in being different in a way that is relevant and valuable to your audiences and creates that advantage. He says strong products and services are highly differentiated from other products and services. It's that simple. It's that difficult, says Austin McGee. Brand is a four-letter word. He then goes through some examples and talks about how businesses are forced to choose between conforming and following the leaders or the pack, or whether they have the ability to go out on their own. It says here, how long will it take our competitors? So what he says is we need to create our own unique selling proposition that he's calling the unique selling point and commonly referred to as USP. And your USP needs to be valuable to your audience and create a competitive advantage. Sounds easy enough, right? Now for the kicker, the advantage needs to be as sustainable as physically possible over the long term. So as you think about this from your own perspective, if you're trying to create an advantage, if you're trying to get the edge, if you're trying to go out there and be different and better than the rest, you have to balance conformity versus uniqueness. Have that uniqueness that is different enough to gain you visibility, to show that you are better, that you are faster, that you have some sort of an advantage. But at the same time, it is also important to conform in certain areas. And I think that that really is the struggle, is to make sure that we are trying to balance the two of them. It's not that easy. I mean, many businesses fail after the first 5 years of being launched. Many other organizations and entities do as well. But I think if you can find a way to balance those two, you have a better chance for success. You're listening to My Strategy. I am your host, John M. Hawkins, coming to you live from the BBM Network and TuneIn Radio. When we come back, we're going to talk about ways to identify your uniqueness. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins. You're listening to My Strategy. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. We're very happy for you to share some time with us here today, and I'm very happy to be here with you today. My strategy episodes are live and on Saturdays at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. Right before the break, we were talking about developing your own USP. USP is your unique selling proposition. We talked about follow a crowd, go no further than the crowd. We're trying to find ways to differentiate ourselves. This segment, I want to talk a little bit about ways we can find our uniqueness. Got an article here that talks about 7 ways to identify your uniqueness. It is from a psychologist. She says here, she believes with every fiber of her being that people are incredibly special. Your mind, body, and spirit, one of a kind. I know that you're in tune with the intricacies of this uniqueness so that you can best be of service to yourself, your loved ones, and the world. So she gives us 7 ways that we can identify our uniqueness. She refers to these as your personal psychological resources. So we got more acronyms here. PRS, the PRS. These are the inner strengths or mental resources that you use to achieve your goals, to overcome a period of stress or difficulty. And I think, too, if you think about an entity, a business, whatever it is that you have, there are certain policies, operating procedures, core values that all help from a personal resources perspective. So if you're looking to have some sort of a correlation between the two, I would say that's how they relate. She says we need to have this internal toolkit that we can draw upon during times of need to help you flourish in life. She says some of the ways of identifying your PRS, which is it's PPRS, your personal psychological resources. She says, what are your best traits and qualities? What do your supportive loved ones say are your best traits and qualities? How have you previously got through difficult periods in your life? What inner strengths or resources did you draw upon? When you have had a difficult experience or conversation, what are some constructive ways, skills, or resources that you use to deal with it? What are some of the achievements and successes that you've had in life so far? Well, this is all very interesting because on this show we talk about a framework that we use. And what she's describing here lines up very closely to what we do from an assess and analyze perspective, where we are trying to assess the situation and determine and do some analysis to figure out actions and steps that we can take. All of this is related and ties together. She gives us these 7 ways. She says, 1, identify your interests and passions. An obvious but essential component to identifying your uniqueness is to get clear on what your interests and passions are. What lights you up? What angers you? What do you Google? What topics do you read about? What could you talk about for hours on end? What makes you feel intelligent, happy, and inspired? What did you love doing as a child? If money wasn't an issue, what would you love to do? If you had an extra hour of sleep in the day to spend it on, what would you do? So it's important for us to get clear on these unique interests and passions. I think another thing, too, is, if you find yourself doing a specific activity and you don't feel hungry and you don't want to stop, then that indicates that that is a passion and something you should be thinking about continuing. And it's the same for, your businesses as well. Learn to listen to your body. Just like your mind, interests, and inner resources, your body is unique. When it comes to taking care of it, what might work for one person won't necessarily work for you. In order to give your body the most love you can, you need to be in tune with it and its unique needs. I think this is an important one because, many times we, as, good workers, we try and, work through the pain, or the athletes are told to work through the pain, and we have to listen, because if your body is not healthy, or if it is damaged, or if you are not ready to take on the task at hand, you are not going to perform as you should. So it's very important when you're going through and trying to identify your uniqueness, that you are fit, that you are healthy, that you are in a position of strength so that as you embark on this journey, it is going to help you. She also says we should be clear on our values. Your values are what makes the most of you, what you put the most value on, and what makes you feel authentic and proud of yourself and most aligned with your best self. We talk about these a lot, the values, the core values. What are the things that you focus on? What are the things that you believe in? She says, write a list of activities that light you up. Listen to your intuition. Embrace your quirks and eccentricities, all ways that you can try and find your uniqueness. And I think, too, as we go through our framework and become aware that we want to find our uniqueness, we can start to assess and analyze and determine what are those activities, what are those decisions we make where we are conforming versus being unique. And we can actually strategize and plan, and we can start to reduce the amount of actions that are conforming if we feel it is going to hurt our strategy or our plan. We have the ability to reach out to others. There's ways to determine if you are the person who's constantly changing the menu item and asking the restaurant to change it for you. It might be that you don't know why you are unique, and you need to have special treatment so that you feel unique, because we all have that sense. So I think as it comes down to really thinking about your systematic approach, putting together your plan to determine your uniqueness, it really comes back to the basics of being aware that this is something that is important for you to work on, to then assess and analyze and determine why is it that you are feeling this way? Why is it that you are unique? Why is it that you feel you need to conform? The pros and cons and the benefits, and ultimately help build that strategy and plan. You're listening to My Strategy. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins, coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Well, when we come back, we're going to talk about ways you can put your plan in place. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins. You're listening to My Strategy. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Very happy to be here today and glad you could join us. In case you missed this broadcast, you can listen on iHeartRadio or Apple iTunes or any of the other major platforms. And if you'd like to have something covered on the show, send an email to talk@johnmhawkins.com or give us a call at 1-844-MY-STRATEGY. That's 1-844-MY-STRATEGY, and the email is talk@johnmhawkins.com. We've been talking today about conformity. Don't conform. It's better to embrace your uniqueness. Talking about the social influence of conformity, talking about exploring the need to feel special, being uniqueness to help is a good way to develop a competitive advantage, and we've been talking about tips and tricks to help you find your uniqueness. We're talking about the pros. A lot of benefits to conformity. Peer pressure, whether it's real or imagined, can help you in certain ways. It can help you when it comes time to breaking habits or walking with those people who are making good choices versus those who make the bad choices. There's a lot of different benefits of conformity, especially in society with regard to security. There's also the downside, though, of conformity. Conformity can hamper your personal growth. It can increase your chance of depression. You could actually lose your identity, and societies that are all conforming to a dictator can do bad things, as we have learned throughout the wars in history. Then we heard that from Doc Dreyfus that it is important for us to feel special. But I think it's important for us to start thinking about whether we know that we are special, and we are special, or do we require special treatment because we do not realize that we are special. And that can be an issue that needs to be worked through, because we really want to know that while we are all special, we need to embrace that. And it can be hard if you don't embrace it. And if you don't embrace it, it can lead to a situation where you want to have special treatment. Because as Dr. Dreyfus says, we are all uncomfortable with this desire. And many of us want special treatment when it comes time to being pulled over by the police officer. Oh, we're the one, we don't deserve the ticket, but give it to everybody else who gets pulled over. So it is important to balance the conformity versus your uniqueness. We then talked a little bit about how we can develop our USP. USP is unique selling proposition, where if you follow a crowd, you will get no further than the crowd. Strong products are differentiated from others, and as a business entity, band, group, organization, the challenge is to remain relevant in this world and valuable to your audience, so you need to create that advantage. And I think it's important for us to start thinking about ways that we can find our uniqueness. There's an ebb and flow. In some cases, you might be super unique. In other cases, you are conforming too much. So we need to be clear and assess and realize when we are conforming and when we are unique. And it all comes down to a balance between uniqueness and conformity. I can say that none of this is easy. It takes effort to break habits, whether they're good habits or bad habits, and you need to be aware of these patterns that you are in. And it also is going to take a conscious prioritization and commitment to your goals and intentions. And if you do, you might just find your own uniqueness. You've been listening to My Strategy. I am your host, John M. Hawkins. Very happy to be here with you today. You've been listening to the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. The show is My Strategy. We will see you next time.